So I have to introduce my story because I'm going to start in the middle of it. I'm going to read part of a story that's called Then, from Obsessed, which is an anthology that came out a few years ago. It's edited by Rachel Kramer Bussel. And this story is actually a sequel to an earlier story that I wrote that was published in an anthology called Passion. That one is called If Then. So anyway, in If, our main character, Valerie, who's also the narrator, is in a relationship with her partner, Chris, and she's going to be the maid of honor at a wedding, and she meets the best man, Hayden, and she's hugely infatuated with him. So If is very much about how she navigates that. And she ends up staying with Chris and does not misbehave according to the constraints of their relationship. So in this story, they've just gone to a party where Hayden was, and she and Chris are just coming back home. I felt a combination of gratitude and wistfulness wash over me as we headed up the stairs. Though my attraction to Hayden was still strong, the relief I felt at its being out in the open was immense, and the appreciation I felt toward Chris for not finding it threatening was almost fierce. I reached for him as we entered the bedroom and wrapped my arms around his waist from behind. "I love you," I said, my voice muffled against his back. "I love you too," he said, unwinding himself and turning around so he could kiss me on the mouth. After a few minutes, I broke away with a smile and headed for the closet, unzipping my dress as I walked. I opened the closet door and almost dropped my dress when Chris said, "So you're interested in Hayden sexually?" I froze. That was a trick question if there ever was one, especially since Chris already knew the answer. Yes, I answered finally. "I think you were aware of that." Chris nodded. "I was just seeing if it was still the case." "Might I ask why?" Chris turned to me. His blue gaze was still unreadable, but I felt the undercurrent of lust in it that instantly ignited my own. He didn't say anything for a moment, just stared at me like that, almost as though he were wrestling with something inside himself. "Maybe it's something I might like to watch." My jaw dropped. It was a suggestion I would never have expected Chris to make. "Watch?" I scarcely dared to breathe as I sought confirmation of what he was saying. "Watch you fuck him. Would you like that?" Chris crossed the room in three full strides, stopping inches from my body as his eyes bored into mine. I looked at him dizzily, almost faint from both the shock and the arousal the suggestion had evoked. He moved a tiny bit closer until he was almost touching me, until I could feel the heat from his body against my vulnerable, naked skin. "Would you?" The demand was calm, a solid, even cover above the simmering desire I sensed beneath it. My fingers reached out and brushed Chris's cup, fully hard now beneath his trousers as he held my gaze. I felt my heart pounding, my breath coming in hot, ragged gasps as I looked up at him. "Yes." Fast forward a little bit, to I'm sure you can imagine where. Chris sat now in the chair to my left, facing the king-size bed. I looked over at him. His expectant gaze was dark with lust, accelerating my own as I turned back to Hayden. Suddenly I felt shy, like the star of the show. The sole one the audience was here to see. Then Hayden stepped forward, and the spell in me broke. I met him without pause, closing the distance between us the way I'd wanted to since I'd first laid eyes on him. The air in the room went from anticipatory holding pattern to oxygen and fire the moment we touched each other. The scene shifting from placid to burning, as Hayden's hands found my shoulders, my hair, my neck, my breasts as he kissed me. My clothes dropped away as I closed my eyes, feeling my body shake as Hayden's lips pressed fervently along my neck. I backed up and fell naked onto the bed. Still standing, Hayden watched me as he ripped open a condom. I recognized the hunger in his eyes, a reflection of my own I'd felt so many times on meeting that silver gaze. The recollection took my breath away. Impulsively, I turned over as Hayden made a move toward the bed. I heard the duplicate intakes of breath as the inner exhibitionist in me seemed to break free, making me rise to my knees and drop my cheek against the mattress. I arched my back, wanting not only for them to get an unobstructed view of my naked pussy, but also for Hayden to enter me that way, the way I'd imagined him doing so many times. I felt him on the bed behind me. With a primal grunt, Hayden grabbed my hips and pushed into me as I gasped, spreading my knees wider as I felt my own wetness drip down my thighs. I turned my face to Cleis. His straining erection poked out of his open jeans, his eyes fastened to where Hayden's and my bodies connected. The hand resting on his cock held the slightest tension only I would recognize. He was holding back. His gaze slid to mine, and my pussy jumped at the carnal desire I saw there. "Spank her," he said suddenly, his voice hoarse. "She loves that." I let out a shriek as Hayden complied, his hand connecting with my ass as I buried my face in the pillow in front of me, nearly dizzy with lust and ecstasy. Hayden spanked me again and again and again until I was so frenzied I hardly knew what was going on. Then he reached beneath me and brushed my clit, and I gyrated against his fingers as I came, gripping the pillow that muffled my scream. My body went limp as I finished. Hayden turned me over and knelt between my legs, and I looked up at him, breathing heavily. His gray eyes looked into mine, the heated yearning I had seen in them so many times, merging with a carnal satisfaction as he slipped back inside me. He fucked me slowly as I ran my hands over my breasts. I moved them languidly, feeling my skin in a more intimate way than I ever remembered doing, connecting with my own body as much as with the other two in the room with me. Suddenly I was utterly vulnerable. I felt fragile, though not in a physical sense. Lying there naked, with Hayden above me, Cleis to my left, the caring and respect and openness I knew was in the room, my breath stopped in my throat. I felt tears come forth and didn't know how to hide them. When they evaporated, I looked back at Cleis. He smiled at me, arousal combined with the tenderness and affection of the whole of the 3.5 years we had shared together, telling me how much he loved this and how much he loved me all at once. I realized a part of what I was feeling was gratitude and a monumental relief that Cleis understood this, that he didn't feel intimidated, that he realized what was happening was no threat to how I felt about him or our relationship, that it was enhancing rather than diminishing anything. I closed my eyes, the warmth rushing through my body making me reach out. Hayden interlaced his fingers with mine, and I opened my eyes. He smiled at me too, the understanding in his gray eyes reflecting back some of the same gratitude I experienced. I arched my back, meeting his slow thrusts, and his breath sharpened. I felt myself close to coming again as he lowered his body onto mine, his lips working their way up my neck to my ear. Goosebumps sprayed over my body as he whispered into it. "Do you know how long I fucking wanted this, wanted you?" The words seemed to shoot physically through me. And I came again, the sound that ripped through my voice coming from my very center as he pressed my hands against the mattress, his fingers squeezing mine until I stilled. My breath shuddered as the climax subsided. Hayden fucked me harder then, rising back up on his knees and grasping my thighs for traction. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Cleis stand and approach me in one fluid motion. I turned my head as he reached me, and his cock and my lips met as in a kiss, his flesh sliding seamlessly into the warm, wet haven of my mouth. I looked up at him with love, swirling my tongue around his length as he ran a hand through my hair. Hayden's breath quickened, and his hands clutched me harder. I spread my legs farther for him, moaning against Cleis as he pounded into me. Cleis started to push his cock in and out of my mouth, meeting one of my breasts as his other hand tightened on my hair. Hayden reached up to grip my waist and gasped as he came, thrusting hard and deep as his fingers dug into my flesh. I closed my eyes as I felt overcome, centering for a moment to take in everything I was receiving. Hayden exhaled deeply as his body jerked, and I opened my eyes, pulling away from Cleis for a moment to meet Hayden's silver gaze as I clenched my pussy around him. I turned and took Cleis's cock back in my mouth, knowing both of them were watching me as I sucked it hungrily. He thrust a little harder as his breath quickened, and I felt the first spurt of cum on my tongue just as Hayden pulled out of me. Cleis groaned as he shot his load into my mouth, and I rested a hand on his thigh, swallowing everything he gave me. When he finished, I let his cock fall from my mouth and gave him the same smile he'd given me moments before from across the room. Hayden, now dressed, sat on the bed as Cleis zipped up his jeans. Only I was still naked, lying still under the gazes of both men as the air in the room calmed down once again. Myriad feelings, both unexpected and expected, moved through me like a kaleidoscope. I hadn't anticipated feeling as close to Chris as I ever had, experiencing a level of trust that was unique, that had never been there before. And I felt an expansion, a freedom evoked not just by sexual satiation, but by surrender. The surrender by all three of us to something unknown, something that could seem threatening, but held the potential for something more, something unseen, something I had just experienced and didn't yet know how to describe. Perhaps most of all, I felt astonished by the groundedness, openness, and self-possession, the willingness to even consider what had just taken place required from both Hayden and Chris. The poignancy I'd experienced seeing them talking at Sarah's party magnified exponentially, and a lump formed in my throat as I marveled at the extraordinariness they had displayed. Then I remembered what I knew about each man, in one case quite a bit, and in the other a strong impression, and it didn't seem so surprising anymore. Thank you.